Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the September 23rd regular meeting of Council. I'd like to first recognize that we are gathered on the traditional territory of the Snuneymuxw First Nation. Our clerk tonight will be Ms. Sheila Gurry. We also have Councillor Manley attending electronically tonight. Tonight's regular meeting of Council is being held in accordance with the Community Charter, Council Procedure Bylaw 2018, number 7272. If during the meeting any member of the gallery has a question regarding an agenda item, please write down your name and the agenda item on the question period sign-up sheet, which is on the table by the double doors to my left. Please note that the Council Procedure Bylaw has been updated, so questions will only be taken on staff reports, consent items, or other business items. Note in the audience tonight, before we start the meeting, I'd like to take a few moments to remind those who are attending in person about the rules of decorum for all Council and committee meetings. A meeting of Council is intended to be a place where democracy can freely take place in a respectful and safe manner. The Council Chambers is a workplace, and there are considerations Council and staff must make to ensure that a safe work environment exists in accordance with WorkSafe BC regulations. To support this, disrespectful conduct will not be tolerated, so we ask that there be no cheering or jeering or other outbursts from the gallery at any time. This will ensure that anyone speaking, whether it be a delegation, member of Council, or staff, is not interrupted and can make their point freely without distraction or fear of ridicule. In instances where a speaker is being inappropriate or has exceeded their time limit, their microphone will be cut off. Similarly, if there are outbursts by any person in the gallery, they will be asked to stop, and if they do not comply, they may be asked to leave as permitted under Section 133 of the Community Charter. If necessary, Council may call a recess in order to reset the environment of the Council chambers. It is our belief that if everyone is respectful of these basic considerations, this meeting and future meetings will be more effective in furthering the business of the City of Nanaimo. The first item on the agenda is the introduction of late items, Ms. Gurry, and we have a number tonight. Please.
Yes, thank you, Your Worship, and good evening, Council. For late items this evening, we have agenda item 5B. We're adding the addition of those minutes for the regular Council meeting September 9th, 2024. We're adding a PowerPoint presentation from the Nanaimo Prosperity Corporation, and that's for agenda item 8A. For agenda item 8B, we're adding the PowerPoint presentation from Tourism Nanaimo, and for agenda item 8C, we're adding the PowerPoint presentation from the Nanaimo Systems Planning Organization. And that's it, Your Worship.
Thank you very much. Motion for adoption of the agenda is amended. Moved Councillor Thorpe, seconded Councillor Perino. All those in favour? Motion for adoption of the minutes is circulated. Moved Councillor Eastmere, seconded Councillor Perino. All those in favour? The next item is Mayor's Report. I have a number of items, but last week was the Union BC Municipalities meeting, which I was unable to attend, but Councillor Eastmere, as acting mayor, led the delegation, and she's going to give us a brief report, and then I'm going to talk about some happy things that happened honoring our city. Councillor Eastmere.
Thank you, Mayor. So Council had a very busy week at the UBCM annual convention, meeting with BC ministers, attending sessions and panels, and voting on resolutions on provincial policies and UBCM priorities. We met with 6 different ministries about a wide range of issues, from housing and healthcare to protecting biodiversity and public safety. Nanaimo also had a number of resolutions up for consideration after they were endorsed by the Association of Vancouver Island and Coastal Communities, of which Councillor Gesselbrecht is currently the president. Our resolutions addressed the need for a provincial housing coordinator, reasonable variances to the BC Building Code and BC Fire Code to enable emergency shelters to remain open, provincial funding for mental health liaison officers, investments in more complex care beds, and provincial core funding for evolving public libraries that Councillor Hammond spoke very well to. And all of those passed, so that's great news. And along with several other good resolutions championed by other communities on items like vacancy control, free transit for youth and students, and a call for the province to support a noise camera pilot project to help municipalities address excessive vehicular noise pollution. So it was a busy week and well worth it. Thank you.
Thank you very much. In addition, there were a couple of awards handed out, and I'm going to refer to both of them. They're over sitting next to Mr. Lindsay, and we'll have a photo op after I've introduced them. But they're 2 significant awards, and I want to offer general compliments to the staff of the City of Nanaimo who've worked so hard to merit these particular accolades. The Community Energy Association, that was represented by Rick Logdenberg, chair of SIA's Board of Directors, happily announced on Wednesday that the City of Nanaimo had received the 2024 Climate and Energy Action Award for the BC Energy Step Code and Zero Carbon Step Code Implementation Strategy. That was presented by him and MLA Brittany Anderson, who was standing in for the Honourable George Heyman, the Minister of Environment and Climate Change Strategy. And the comments provided at that time by the judges: the City of Nanaimo displayed true leadership and innovation by being the first BC municipality to accelerate both the top level of the Zero Carbon Step Code and the upper step of the Energy Step Code in the same bylaw. They built a very strong foundation with their modeling work and proactive and nimble engagement strategies, which helped them resolve many challenges along the way. Their efforts will help pave the way for more municipalities to become early adapters. In addition, we also won the UBCM Community Excellence Award for Nanaimo Reimagined City Plan. As many of you know, and I trust some of you actually participated in the process, it was a very long process in the city, a very intensive process, handled very well by staff. The Community Excellence Awards recognize and celebrate UBCM member First Nations regional districts and local governments that have implemented projects or programs that go above and beyond in meeting the purposes of local government in BC. The awards are intended to showcase outstanding initiatives and share them with other members to implement in their own communities. And we won the Excellence in Sustainability, and that's a very high honor indeed, recognizing us out of all the municipalities in the province of British Columbia. So again, congratulations and thanks to all the staff who were involved. Appropriate time for a bit of a photo op, Mr. Lindsay, and who's going to participate?
So, Your Worship, we'll do the UBCM award first, and we'll have representatives from kind of across the city representing different departments. So we have, we'll ask them to come on down now and have a picture taken with you.
Come down in the front, and some intrepid photographer can do the good work.
Yep, we'll do that one first. Yep.
Unfortunately, I have to acknowledge that tree did die in Climate and Energy Action Award.
It's actually pine beetle.
Good one.
We're going to gender balance here.
Thank you.
A few more items. Just to remind everyone that the alternative approval process for Public Works Yard has started. The process runs from September 18th to October 31st, and it remains open until 4:30 on October 31st. It's seeking elector approval to adopt the Public Works Yard Updates Boring Bylaw 2024, number 7386, and if adopted, this bylaw would allow the city to bore up to $90 million to finance the cost of replacing the fleet maintenance building and crew and administration building in the Public Works Yard. As usual, there's a fair bit of chatter out there in the social media that I don't participate in, and I would simply encourage everyone to actually go to the city website and look at all the material that is available to help guide you in making a decision about whether or not you think this is a good idea and whether or not you think the city should indeed borrow the money to achieve this end that Council has agreed is important. We are also seeking applications for our 2025 social planning grants. Beginning today, the City of Nanaimo will be accepting applications for the 2025 social planning grants program. A total of $85,000 is available under this program. All applications should support the desired outcomes and policy outlined in City Plan, In particular, proposed projects should contribute to the goal, a healthy Nanaimo, community well-being and livability. Organizations that apply for funding must be based in Nanaimo and/or propose a project that serves the City of Nanaimo residents. Eligible organizations include nonprofit societies, recognized religious groups, and neighborhood associations. Ongoing operational expenses cannot be funded through the Social Planning Grants Program. And finally, well, not finally, I just want to mention last weekend was this weekend just passed was the VIX. Get your boots dirty, we're turning 130, which was the theme of this year's VIX. And I remind everyone that the VIX is accomplished every year through the hard work of an incredibly effective nonprofit and a lot of volunteer labor. And the VIX is only 20 years younger than this city has been in existence since its incorporation 150 years ago. And coming up on Monday next week, a week today, it's the National Day for Truth and Reconciliation. It is a time for this community and all Canadians to reflect on what reconciliation means and the truth of our history. As I've always said many times, Canada has a history and it has a past. The city is working very hard to ensure that it's a successful community event that'll achieve the goals of helping health and reconciliation. There are a number of free events on the day. Oliver Woods Community Centre, and running from 10 to 4. Traditional welcome and a blessing by my good friend Elder Lawley. Bouncy castles, an open gym, storytelling with Elder David Leaxa. Artist and knowledge keeper, arts and crafts, interactive community booths, story walk in the playground area, refreshments and food trucks, and while supplies last, t-shirt sales, of course. Also at the Nanaimo Aquatic Center, everyone welcome swim within capacity limits. I'm nodding to Mr. Harding here. Safety is important. The weight room, story walk in the lobby and pool deck area, games and activities in the Jack Little rooms, and again, while sales last, t-shirt sales. And finally, the Nanaimo Ice Center. It's an everyone welcome skates, free skate rentals, 10 to 11:45 a.m., 12 to 1:45 p.m., 2 to 4. So I hope everyone will take advantage of that and take the time on that day, as we are all busy enjoying family time, to reflect, as I say, on the history of this nation and the importance of what we learned through the Truth and Reconciliation process, and continue to do so and will do for a very long time. I have nothing further. We have nothing to rise on report on, Ms. Gurry, but we do have 3 presentations tonight, and the first is Colin Stansfield, the CEO of the Nanaimo Prosperity Corporation, and Richard Horbaczewski, the board chair, at our quarterly update. Gentlemen, good evening. Introduce yourselves to the record, please, and we look forward to your presentation, and thank you for coming.
Good evening. Thank you, Mayor Krogh, councillors and guests, both in person and online. I'm Richard Horbaczewski. I am the chair of Nanaimo Prosperity Corporation. Before we begin, I'd like to acknowledge how privileged we are to be gathered today on the traditional territories of the Snuneymuxw First Nation and recognize the important contributions of the peoples whose history and culture are deeply embedded in the fabric of Nanaimo. Our efforts towards economic growth must always reflect our respect for Indigenous knowledge and partnerships. I'd also like to thank Council for providing this forum to provide an update and report on the important work of Nanaimo Prosperity Corp we are conducting. It is a privilege to be here today representing NPC as its chair. As you know, the prosperity of our city relies on the collective efforts to foster sustainable economic growth, support investment, and create opportunities for all members of our community. Since its inception, the vision of Nanaimo Prosperity Corp has been dedicated to working alongside our municipal, business, and Indigenous partners to shape a prosperous future for Nanaimo. Today, we are at a place that calls for strategic collaboration and an adaptive approach to evolving economic landscape. Our team, led by our Executive Director, Colin Stansfield, has been diligently working to implement initiatives that align with the long-term vision we share for Nanaimo, one that emphasizes inclusivity, resilience, and economic vitality. Before I turn things over to Colin for a deeper dive into our initiatives, I'd like to take a moment to thank each of you for your support and partnership. The work that we are doing at the Nanaimo Prosperity Corporation is only made possible through the collective contributions of this council, the business community, and our broader partners. With that, I'll now pass the floor over to Colin to share some more details on our current work that lies ahead and answer any questions that you may have. Thanks.
Thank you very much. Mr. Stansfield, please.
Thank you, and nice to see all of you again. So just building on what Richard said, I wanted to extend a thank you to you for building in these quarterly updates. It was something that was certainly talked about in the economic development strategy, but hadn't been formalized prior to me joining the organization, and so we welcome this opportunity. I would like to, of course, begin by expressing our gratitude to our First Nations hosts and admiration of their leadership in economic reconciliation. I think the return of the Swayson Village site, the purchases of Casino Nanaimo and Elements Casino Victoria, the announcement of 59 affordable rental units on Warpath Road are all wonderful examples of leadership that they provide on these territories. With respect to reporting, it is really important to us that we remain in constant contact with you and all of our partners. These quarterly updates are an essential element in effective communication between our partners, and we're pleased that we're able to have this opportunity of being able to check in quarterly and not just show up at budget time, when sometimes announcements can be couched in asks, which can get a little awkward, but also lost in bigger and deeper conversations. And so, again, grateful for the opportunity. To speak a little bit about internal activities, still very much a startup. You're looking at one of the 1.8 full-time equivalent staff that we've got working on the team right now, supported by contractors on projects, but still very much getting used to who we are and how we contribute to the city. Our board is working on a transition from being a full governance board into being a full governance board, finalizing a strategic vision that amplifies the priority of all of our partners and provides direction for the ongoing evolution of the Prosperity Corporation. From the staff level, we're working on building out efficient and effective operations, establishing sound HR policies, investing in our communications strategy, and I want to just take a moment to thank Councillor Eastmere for pointing out that, with our new brand that we launched, there was some work to be done around accessibility. That's something that we've worked on in the last few months. We've made sure to go through all of it with an eye towards the web content accessibility guidelines. We've updated all of our guidelines to ensure that we're hitting AA or AAA levels when we're doing all of our digital and web content. We're also then making sure that we are engaging in strong financial management and actually even renovating a new office space so that we can accommodate co-location with Tourism Nanaimo and encourage participative programming with community. Thinking about alignment with the city, this notion of an integrated service delivery model. And so it's very important to us that in working closely then with City of Nanaimo staff, and a special acknowledgement to Ms. Manhas, who I've been working with closely to make sure that we gain greater clarity around the accountabilities and responsibilities with respect to the deliverables spelled out in the integrated action plan. We really want to make sure that we are, one, leveraging the strengths of our respective models, understanding what a city does well and what an external economic development agency can do well, but also that we are providing clear and seamless service to internal and external stakeholders. When someone wants to do business in the City of Nanaimo, we want to make sure that we're meeting them with the appropriate level of service. In terms of how we do create value for the city, this notion of championing major projects is really important to us. Economic development requires working at multiple scales. That will always be the work that we do in community at the sort of enterprise level that more people see. But major projects are slower. They're slower to garner public attention and hopefully praise, but they generate proportionally greater returns. They are economy-defining initiatives. They often require, or at least significantly benefit from, some backbone support in the form of convening or facilitating. From an entity like NPC that has a little bit of neutral objectivity, that has long-term vision and available capacity. An example of where we're doing this is joining with our friends at the Fair Care Alliance and the whole sort of healthcare ecosystem. NPC is going to be running point on a socioeconomic impact study for expanded hospital services. When we think about local economic development, the notion that it takes a network to drive success, business retention and expansion is a classic component of any municipal or regional economic development strategy, and certainly it is something that is done best in collaboration with like-minded organizations. Again, I've been working with city staff, and we are facilitating now regular coordination of our local small business ecosystem, participating with not only NPC in the city, but our Chamber of Commerce, our Tourism Nanaimo, local BIAs, Community Futures, the Credit Union, WorkSafe BC, all of those entities who have in their mission a mandate to serve small business. It's not for any one of us to do this in isolation, but to recognize that we are all part of that same ecosystem, and we can leverage each other's resources to do the best for businesses to achieve everything that they want to in our community. In the area of donut economics, the city has done an absolutely tremendous job building it into the integrated action plan. The monitoring framework is world-class. I think what we learned at the May 30th session that was held and supported by consultants from Future Fit Cities, there's now an opportunity now to roll it out into the community. And the next step is to open that conversation and welcome in other forms of leadership. The Prosperity Corporation is ready to step up in that regard, and in fact, have already been engaged in program design to support wider community rollout. You're going to see a very visible presence of Donut Economics at the upcoming VIEA Summit. Donut Days are taking place in November, worldwide, November 6th through 9th, and probably a few surprises along the way too, but I was told to provide an update, but don't give spoilers, and so stay tuned for that. When it comes to promoting Nanaimo, this notion of place-based promotion, we've been working in partnership with Tourism Nanaimo to promote greater awareness of the amazing opportunities the city provides for residents and visitors alike. It's about ensuring maximum profile in our local market through things like the summit, but also planning for wider recognition. For the Prosperity Corporation, this is about building our investment readiness, building a credible investment promotion brand and marketing program, a visual brand and a general narrative, preparing a communications strategy, developing evidence-based value propositions with sector-specific narratives, shortlisting key targets, and then developing the client relationship programs to make sure that we can not only manage ongoing business relationships, but track deal flow. All of which is meant to support investment attraction. The economic development strategy is all about making Nanaimo a terrific place to live and do business, and then welcoming the world to invest alongside of us in that shared vision of a thriving regional economy. Working closely with provincial and federal departments to ensure Nanaimo is benefiting from every available government support and opportunity. On the provincial level, we've been working to achieve top-of-mind recognition with the staff at Trade and Invest British Columbia, working through their Vancouver office into their global offices to ensure that whether someone wants to invest in BC, to locate their business in BC, or bring BC products and services to the global market, Nanaimo is on the map. On the federal front, we're working with staff at Global Affairs Canada to prepare an application for the CanExport Community Investments Program, which provides financial support to communities like Nanaimo to help them attract, retain, and expand their foreign direct investment activities. These are non-repayable grants, which is fantastic, between $3,000 and $500,000 to cover up to 50% of eligible expenses. Our friends at the Southern Island Prosperity Partnership were able to capture $57,000 this year, $39,000 the year before. We want to make sure we're coming in at least with parity, but more, right? More. So our 2025 work plan that you'll hear about at budget time leans heavily on actions that were identified in the ECDUM strategy, establishing a trade and advisory board, profiling priority sectors, becoming investment ready, and developing champions and partners. Indeed, every aspect of the strategy is designed to help accelerate investment attraction, getting Nanaimo's economic development team that we are on together closer to opportunities. And I did mention a few dates, but just for the sake of making sure that we get them in your calendar, of course, coming up later in October, the Vancouver Island Economic Alliance State of the Island Economic Summit is taking place. Terrific schedule of sessions, very informative. We've got Greg Hart coming to speak on donut economics as a verb, not just as a noun, at the main keynote on the Wednesday evening, showcasing wonderful examples that are taking place in the city. Donut Days then, happening November 6th through 9th, as I mentioned, is a global event. For us, we're going to be putting some local initiatives that are really focused on sectoral and public engagement, welcoming the community to make sure that they're involved and feel some ownership of the framework. And then finally, Buy Local Week, BC Buy Local Week, which takes place December 2nd through 8th, is a province-wide campaign that Prosperity Corporation is partnering with Loco BC. It's all about the impact of shifting consumer spending to favor local independent businesses. We'll be running very consumer-facing campaigns at that time, but I'll come back to you and perhaps encourage you to consider adopting or proclaiming BC Buy Local Week, one more way that you can encourage our locals. And so with that, I will thank you for your patience, for your time, and for the opportunity. Remind you that we are always here and available. Contact information on the slide. And if you have questions now, I'd be happy to answer anything.
Thank you very much, Mr. Stansfield. In order, Councillors Armstrong and then Thorpe.
Thank you. I have two. The first one is we're seeing many businesses closing in Nanaimo, citing the cost of doing business in Nanaimo. Are you reaching out to find out what is happening and if there's something that we can be doing to retain these businesses? Because when I've talked to two different companies that were looking at relocating here, but after hearing some of these things, decided to go elsewhere.
Thank you for the question. And so we've been chatting with city staff and with the chamber and with the BIAs to make sure that at least one of us is connecting with them and developing that plan to put in a more robust kind of exit interview component to a BRE program. It's definitely one in which conversation is required because it's easy to jump to assumptions about why one might be closing. I can think of one operation that's closing down on sort of 5th and Bruce. the exact same business model opening 400 meters away in a couple of weeks. And so when they cite these operational challenges, it's often very interesting to hear from them, what is it that your business is struggling with? And what I hear in those moments are a need for us to make sure that as they're opening and while they're operating, they know that we're here to support them, because there are a myriad of programs available, not just in the city, but province-wide to support them. More specifically, to speak to how Nanaimo stacks up compared to other communities, that is something that I don't have the research on yet, but is something that we want to be doing.
Thank you. And then my second question is, and what are you doing to attract, and I'm looking more at industry to come here, because obviously industry pays us much more significantly as a tax base, which can help alleviate some of the crises that we're seeing for families as well as other businesses.
Yeah, and so I think immediately about conversations we're having where we're bringing together large landholders who are now in possession of undeveloped commercial lands and saying to them, what is it that you're looking to put in place? How many square feet of manufacturing space are you bringing in? We're learning about the supply that is here before we then go out to market. We are, as I mentioned earlier, still very much a startup, and so wanting to get a sense of what we have as a product here before we go out. But right now it's about that investigation of what do we have, how do we make sure that we're building out the right type of industrial and commercial lands that will allow for employment intensification to create those good jobs that you mentioned.
And when you're doing that, will you ensure that we're competitive against neighboring communities, or not ensure, I said, come back to us and let us know if we are or aren't?
Indeed.
Thank you.
Yes.
Thank you. Councillor Thorpe.
Thank you. Excuse me. Thank you very much, Your Worship. Through you, if I may. First of all, thank you, Mr. Stansfield and Mr. Horbashewski. Really appreciate your attendance this evening, and I look forward to these quarterly updates. I think it's very important, as you've indicated, that Council be kept aware of what you're working on and how things are going. A question just related to your final slide, and first of all, I understand that you're still getting up and running. It's early days yet. But your final slide invited investors to connect with you, and I just wondered if at this early stage if you have had much response to that invitation, and if so, what are you hearing from investors? What are they looking for in Nanaimo? What are they challenged by in Nanaimo? Do you have any inkling of those sort of things yet?
It's been, thank you for the question. It's been a mixed bag. Sometimes folks are just looking for who do I talk to in the city, and in that case it's easy enough to forward them along. Sometimes they present as, I'm looking to open up a business here and I want to make sure that that I'm taking advantage of every resource available. And so you'll meet with them and you'll hear what kind of space are you looking for, what sort of labor requirements will you have, skills training opportunities that we might be able to put in place ahead of time. What's happened in a few of those instances, though, is then you actually realize what they're looking for is investors. So these are folks with an idea who are looking for money, and in those moments, we're learning that some of our messaging needs to be about the fact that we are not a municipal development corporation. I don't have land to develop for them, and I don't have investment to buy into their company yet. And it might be that that's something we can do further down the road. But sort of in these early days, then, it is very much just about listening to what they need and doing our best to find those. And so we rely on partnerships with folks like the Chamber of Commerce, with things like the Mid-Island Business Initiative, to be able to then relay that information to them to take advantage of their more deeply established networks.
Great. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you very much, gentlemen, and thank you to your Point 8 staffer as well, and all of the members of the board and those who work with you. Much appreciate the report. Thank you. The next is Carly Pearboom, Executive Director, and Aggie Wayhill, Board Chair, Tourism Nanaimo. Good evening. Nice to see you.
Good evening. It's nice to see you as well. As you can see, my name is Aggie Whale. As you can see, Carly is not here in physical form today. She will be joining us via the video link. I'd like to start by thanking the City Council for the trust that you put in Tourism Nanaimo and for the support that we have received in reimagining what Tourism Nanaimo can be and tourism in Nanaimo can be. We are very excited to be working with and in allyship with the Snuneymuxw First Nation and on the unceded ancestral territory. I would also like to thank Councillors Perino and Thorpe for their continued leadership and participation on our board. And at that, because I was not prepared to actually have to talk today, I thought I got to sit in the back row, I will turn it over to Carly at this time.
Thank you so much. Ms. Pearboom, good evening.
Good evening. Isuelo, good day, and it's nice to see you, Worship and Council. It's been a minute. As Aggie mentioned, I respectfully acknowledge that Nanaimo lies within the traditional territory of the Snuneymuxw First Nation. Certainly, they have lived and gathered and welcomed visitors to their land since time immemorial, and we are grateful for the work that we are able to do on these lands. If I can have the next slide, please. Tourism Nanaimo, as you know, has been going through a transformation this past year as we've really dug into what is our purpose and intent in the next 5 years with our destination strategy and also as an organization. This last year has left the board envisioning Nanaimo as becoming a premier destination for Vancouver Island and really focusing on the intention for the organization within the community, one of them being allyship within our residents, been partners in the industry, and particularly with Snuneymuxw First Nation. We've also wanted to make sure that we're empowering better change, guided by the principles of sustainability, diversity, equity, and inclusion, and accessibility as we authentically showcase and encourage people to visit Nanaimo. And lastly, empowering sustainable futures. So not only are we supporting tourism that it benefits our community, but also enriches the lives of our residents, which then become advocates for our destination and our sector going forth. When we're looking at the strategic focus and year-round economic growth, Tourism Nanaimo, in collaboration with the local industry, has finalized the 2025 and 2030 Destination Development Strategy. This was recently approved by the Ministry of Finance and will certainly be our guiding post and framework for the next 5 years for us. When looking at the sector overall and what that means in benefit and impact for the community, there are 793 businesses in Nanaimo that are related to accommodation and food sector, accounting for 11.4% of our business licenses within the city and representing 8.8% of our total labor market. So certainly becoming a driver economically and seeing growth in that area. We can just pause on this next slide. If we can go back. You're kind of jumping ahead of me on that one. When we're looking at the challenges and opportunities, certainly that we're seeing in Nanaimo, post-pandemic, there was a strong focus on revitalizing meetings and conferences, which shifted focus towards supporting that piece of the sector. While in that happening, our leisure travelers significantly changed their travel behavior throughout the province and nationally. And this has presented a bit of a new challenge for Nanaimo, which it was once kind of a strong market, not something we necessarily put a lot of strength behind, but is certainly becoming a focus again as we see this softening. The other challenges that we're seeing here is also transportation and connectivity issues across Vancouver Island, primarily with bus and car rentals, which is impacting visitation to our area and region. But this is also creating an opportunity for Nanaimo to position itself competitively by offering an added value to travelers by extending their stay on the island and catering to those that are seeking direct travel options. Nanaimo certainly has those both in drive-in and fly-in, and we're hoping that we can capitalize on the shift in this part of the market. Recent developments with the city with both Moto and Evo bikes throughout the city only strengthen the accessibility that people can have by catching either a direct flight into the city, whether it be Harbour Air, Helijet, Hello, or coming in through YCDE and capturing that ride into town. They'll be able to then easily move throughout the city. We have seen that hotel occupancy and revenue per room has seen a modest growth this year, though room rates have yet to stabilize following the increase of inventory. We do believe that the increase in leisure travel and overnight stays can support the travel trade and help stabilize these rates moving forward. And while these factors certainly present some challenges and opportunities, Tourism Nanaimo is ready to enhance that visitor experience and boost the economic impact by addressing those challenges head on. When we look at collaboration and industry and our key stakeholders, certainly this is routed by the leadership that the city has shown in the Nanaimo's Reimagine plan. The adoption of the donut economy model definitely supports a seamless collaboration between departments, helping remove barriers that may otherwise hinder our progress in destination development. We're really looking at how to ensure that we are addressing connectivity throughout the city, educating folks on services that are already provided, and highlighting the arts and culture scene. And there's not only so much that touches our desks and the desk at the city, but there's many of the work that we're doing that also reaches the ministry's desks, and we're working with those partners as well to address the challenges that we see, but also the opportunities that can come by working together. Certainly, we know that the key to collaboration and success is going to be working collaboratively going forward and ensuring that the impact within the city is not only for Tourism Nanaimo and the industry sector of tourism, but also for Cinnamon Nation, the Prosperity Group, the Nanaimo Airport, and the many industry partners across the community overall. They are really the ones that are driving force, and we're just here to help ensure that that visitor experience and knowledge of the city is known wide. When we're looking at key wins and progresses through this year, it definitely has been a fast pace. We have quite a few conferences already this year that have come to fruition. We currently have 35 conferences on the books for 2025. Most notable events in the conference sector is the BC Library Association Conference for next year and the Canadian Palliative Care and Hospice Association in 2026 with really great numbers. For tourism and sport, Tourism Nanaimo will be the liaison for the Nanaimo 2025 55 Plus Games that will be held next September. We also have the BC Squash Championships and BC School Sports Track and Field Championships, which I'm sure will only be more exciting with our recent home golds from the Olympics that are here. And as a result of this portfolio growing, the opportunities for provincial and national events are more tangible. So we'll be looking at bids that are complementary to the infrastructure that the city already has and where we have capacity. We have launched the brand that is Nanaimo, and we're seeing the evolution of that already as industry and community engagement shapes the ongoing development of how it's going to be processed and used by partners. Certainly, it's played a key role in really creating some great local engagement and activating those opportunities with local businesses to really showcase what it is that makes them unique in Nanaimo. When it looks at resource development, no work can be done without all the groundwork in the back. So 2025-2030 Destination Development Plan is done. We have a strong communications and PR strategy going forward for 2024 and 2025, so that we're not only in market with promotional and destination news, but we're also going to be trying to be in the news for as many positive stories that Nanaimo also has going for it. We're looking at creating, going forward, again, more collaborative toolkits for brand messaging with partners. And we're looking at creating a more robust meetings and conventions toolkit. It's done to date, but there's always room for growth there after we have feedback as well. When we're looking at some of the components of our programming, there's a few things that I really just wanted to kind of shout out here. The incentive program being one of them. This is something that we offer for very large conferences, and it's been a huge part of why we've been very successful in getting new business to the community. The Vancouver Island BC Land Summit event that we had this past spring brought in over 600 delegates to the community, generating around $725,000 in local impact, which is what we're striving for, and it's kind of the hope from every conference that we can hopefully get on the books. When it comes to marketing and engagement, certainly the PR and media pieces have been huge this year, with a public relations estimated value around $568,000. So really making those investments in that time in PR and building those relationships with different networks and news outlets to ensure that Nanaimo's positive stories are top of mind, are coming forward and being seen. When we're looking at what's next and what are we going to be up to, certainly we're not losing any steam as we roll to the end of this month and into the end of the year. We're working with the airport on route development and discussions with them about how we can continue to support their efforts. We're reviewing the MOU with hoteliers in the conference center to boost sales and raise awareness around the meetings and conference opportunities. We're supporting a local shop initiative as the commercial street closures continue. We're reviewing the 2024 budget and annual planning reports to make sure that we're going to be there for the deadline with the province. And of course, going over our PR and communications plan for 2025 and going forward. All of these things said, certainly these align with the larger aspirations of not only the destination, but really what we heard from industry when we did all of the engagement sessions and have been speaking with them continuously of what are the things that are going to make their efforts within this sector tangible and successful. So part of that is diversifying the tourism offerings and alongside the industry partners, elevating our visibility and showcasing ourselves as a premier destination for not only leisure, but sport and conference, and making sure that we have an accessible destination and really model that inclusivity and cohesion that we'd like to see and demonstrate throughout the industry. So each annual plan that we go forward with will keep these objectives in focus. It'll also be establishing a baseline this year going forward for what success will look like. And I'm always more than happy to take a few questions. I know you have a large agenda, so I wanted to make sure I was concise this evening.
Thank you very much. Much appreciated. Councillor Perino, please.
Thank you, Your Worship. And just a quick question to Ms. Paraboom. The new office now has been open for a few months. How's it going?
We've been working on some leasehold improvements to make sure the space will fit everyone and we can all work in there collaboratively and have the two different organizations' boards meet there. But it's going really well. It's lovely to have that touch point with the Prosperity Group and certainly for our team to have a space that they'll be able to work together, and it's going to be imperative for them to really collaborate more on a daily basis.
That's great news. And I just want to say that Ms. Wayhill has only been our chair for a very short period of time. And so thank you for stepping into the role, and we look forward to working with you. Thank you.
Thank you. And it's a very general question, and if you don't feel comfortable answering it, don't be shy about telling me to forget it. Where's the greatest potential growth in terms of visitors? Is it people on Vancouver Island? Is it people from the Lower Mainland? Is it out of country, out of province? Where do you see the best growth potential?
I think we have a really great opportunity to really hone in on the Lower Mainland and certainly our Alberta market segment. That's really strong for us right now. When it comes to our island demographic, that is more of a changing of perception and reputation work that we're doing, and we're already seeing some really positive feedback coming from islanders that have come into Nanaimo in recent months. But I think our primary growth areas really will be that nearby market of Lower Vancouver. They're loving the hello. They're taking those direct flights into the community, and the groundswell that we're getting from that, I think, is going to change what our leisure market looks like considerably.
Thank you very much. I'm not seeing any other questions. Thank you very much to both of you tonight. Much appreciated.
Thank you for having us. It's always a pleasure.
And the next is John McCormick, Executive Director, and Dawn Bonner, Board Chair of the Nanaimo Systems Planning Organization. Gentlemen, good evening. Welcome. Nice to see you.
Thank you for being here. I'll do the start the whole thing. Sure. Thank you, Your Worship, for allowing us to be here. I'd first like to recognize that we are meeting here today on the traditional territory, the Snuneymuxw First Nation. And I want to thank you, yourself, Your Worship, Council, and staff for all the help that they've been giving us over this period of time, and everybody else in the audience as well, for wherever political bent they come from. So today we're going to give you a little bit of brief, short description from my point of view of what the board is doing, and then John's going to talk about some of the actual things that we've been able to accomplish over the last little period of time.
I can't seem to change the slides, so maybe we're... Oh, there we go.
Okay. So today we're going to talk about our mandate and structure. I'm just going to read right off the slide, so Aaron will be very happy for that. The homeless context, also current projects that we were working on. In that vein, there are some projects that we're able to openly talk with you about right now. There are some other projects that are not quite for public consumption yet, but we're more than willing to come to council in an in-camera meeting to talk to you about some of those things that we're working on, certainly. And here, many of you who have worked with us at the beginning of this process and when we created the Nanaimo SPO are familiar with this graph. It just shows our relationship to the other organizations around here. And I would probably say through the work that John's done, we have a really good, very good relationship with all of these organizations. And many of them are actually part of our board members as well. And so this is our reason for being. We're here to, I think, I'm going to go off script here a little bit, not that we have one, but I want to talk about the board itself and the work we're doing. It's a pleasure working with the board that we have. We have many people from various things, and including the staff that sits with us in our meetings as well. We're able to really accomplish some great things. And we're also, my board has a hell yeah, let's do it sort of attitude, which allows us to really move through and get some projects going and get some work done that I think is really great for the city of Nanaimo. And so this is some of the things that is part of our mandate, as was done when we got our charter, and it includes research, data analysis, education, information. We're going to be looking at setting up the Health and Housing Task Force in the near future. And we are here to coordinate system approaches for homelessness, as we have done, and John will describe that a little bit more. And my favorite part is to identify, communicate, and coordinate so that you as council can advocate to the province, whoever they may be in the future, about some of the work that needs to be done and some of the gaps that we are experiencing here. And to give you hard numbers so that when you do go meet with them, that you'll be able to say, this is the reason why we need this much housing on this date. So that's the work that we're doing now. And we have, as I said, we have a board of directors, 9 members. We also, our City of Nanaimo rep, which is Ben. We have an SFN member and a prosperity member. We have seats for them. They don't come to our meetings on a regular basis, but we're hoping that's going to change in the future. And we also have various practitioners, members in the community and the agencies that are on our board, and we also have community members, which are, you know them well, and they're very excellent people. And we also have a team of 4, and John here is our executive director, and he's going to talk a little bit more about them later. And, am I still up?
Sure, if you do.
All right, okay, well, no, I think this one was yours.
Okay.
All right,
I can
fine.
take that one.
Thank you, Mr. Bonner.
Your Worship and Council. As you know, we leverage resources. We're doing our best to facilitate, collaborate with our partners in the community and stakeholders. And we also, are very clearly focused on looking for opportunities to fund some of the work that needs to be done. And so there's a number of different ways in which we look at this. One example would be CMHC has some research funding, and we're working with other communities on Vancouver Island to try and identify locations, lands that we can actually potentially redevelop for housing. It's a nice example of how we can partner with within the community, but also with other communities on Vancouver Island. The Rental Protection Fund is something that is clearly top of mind for us. The SPO can't actually participate as a qualified organization for the Rental Protection Fund, but we can work with Bolinas, who do have that capacity. And as you see, other opportunities as well for funding. I think it's important because, as they say, if we have this number of people in the room, we probably get this number of different ideas about what the SPO should be. So I would like to just identify that what we don't do is duplicate effort. What we don't do is wander outside of our mandate, and we don't compete for funds with our community partners. In fact, we support them and make sure that, or do our best to try and help them to raise funds. And we work within the funding budget that we have, the funding envelope. We don't run housing programs, and we don't speak on behalf of funders, the city, community housing providers, which is sometimes the reason why we need to speak to you in camera rather than speaking to you in public, because there are things we can talk about, but we would, for public consumption, we'll leave that to our partners and stakeholders. I just wanted to very quickly identify that we have done a fair amount of work on updating the numbers now in the Health and Housing Action Plan, and we'll be providing those to you in some detail in the coming weeks. These are just 3 numbers that are impactful. And the original plan, it's about 6,000 people were living on the edge of homelessness. Now it's about 10,000. The number of who were experiencing homelessness over the course of a year was around 1,400. Now it's about 2,700. And this number was of experiencing long-term chronic homelessness, and the Health and Housing Action Plan said 180. Our estimates are that it's closer to 1,000. So that just kind of sets the table for what we're dealing with. And I'll just, as an editorial comment, suggest to you that much of the homelessness that we're facing, or a large portion of it, is driven by the success of the community, in the sense that we are not providing housing for people who are at the lower end of the economic spectrum. And we're really challenged in that regard because Nanaimo is a very increasingly prosperous and attractive place to come to. And it is the other side of the coin, being a community that's fast growing, very challenging. So we've done a couple of different looks at where we're at. I just wanted to present this to you very briefly. The pit count suggests that, and I know the number that is in all of your heads is 550 individuals, but that's identified. The number that have actually been surveyed from the pit count, the most recent pit count, was 453. When we did other looks at the community, it's more like 1,000. And one of those was the Outshop, which is no longer funded. And it was providing, in the span of its existence, 2,600 tents, 2,700, almost 2,800 sleeping bags, and other kinds of supplies. So, this is now no longer a program that we have. It was funded through Reaching Home funding, and it didn't get renewed funding, and it plays a vital role as a stopgap measure. It's clearly not where we want anyone to be, but it's necessary when people are shelterless and when we're looking at the kind of numbers we're looking at. So just to move forward, we are active and probably next in line to be the community of choice around BC Housing's implementation of HIFIS. We were just in calls today about that, and so Abbotsford's first for a number of reasons, and then we'll be the next community that will be focused on, and that's really important because access to good quality data that's live really matters to understanding how we're doing and the kind of impact we're having. A number of items of research. We're updating our comparative analysis that Mayor Krogh, you and I have talked about a few times, and so we wanted to make sure we know where we stand in the national picture. We had, as you know, the Warming Center report, updating the Health and Housing Action Plan, and then, as I said, we're working with other Vancouver Island communities. The importance of that is that there is a flow of community members up and down Vancouver Island. So working with our partners in Campbell River and Comox and Cowichan, Port Alberni, Victoria matters, because understanding that flow and also working to be able to share case files and to be able to have a continuum of care on Vancouver Island really matters. We are looking at, based on the test last year around the emergency or extreme weather response program, seeing if we can expand that program, which means a couple of new locations that may connect up with the efforts by city staff to create a daytime drop-in center, which could, as needed, be used for overnight as well. And then, as you know, Heart and Hearth funding is bringing about 238 units online. And I wanted to talk very briefly about Travelers Lodge, which is a nice little bit of a success story. There's not much I'm going to say about it tonight, except that it is in progress and moving along quickly. And we are excited that it's come online, and I think it's a very good use of a facility that was tailor-made for this kind of a use and gladly didn't get lost before it disappeared. So as I've quipped with my colleague Lorna Beecroft, it only took us a decade to get it. But we worked hard over the last 6 months to get it to this point, and we're happy to see that it is moving forward. It is a very good example, though, of how we can repurpose, and I was heartened to hear about the UBCM motion to see how we can use more facilities like that, because it really does make a difference, and it's much quicker than waiting for a development process that takes many years. Thanks. Activities and process, as my board chair indicated, we're going to reconstitute the Health and Housing Task Force. Funding programs, expanding extreme weather. We're right now doing some work around understanding where in our community there is developable land amongst community agencies and community organizations, churches. And then the second stage of that will be to have conversations with them about how many of them might be interested, and to start to move along a continuum of providing them with the support, care, and feeding and watering that they're going to need to be able to move some of these projects along that will eventually, we would like to think, result in below-market housing that meets some of the need. And then, as you know, we think it's important that there are standards of practice. We continue to work towards that, and we do support funding activities and opportunities for our partners in the community, because that's where the funding is going to come from to actually do some of this work. So this fall, we'll work on these 4 items, and interestingly, on this sheet, there's a GIS-based system developed in Abbotsford that helps them to track the delivery of housing supply services like water and food and whatnot to encampments. And so we're looking at that, and we've talked with city staff about how we might be able to benefit from that ourselves. So as I said, just in summary, we're laser focused on gaps and leverage points, and every action that we take has a direct connection to supply of related housing services or below market subsidized housing stock growth. And we are pretty committed to being able to produce about 100 units of shelter housing a year through the effort of the SPO. I think that would be a pretty significant contribution. And we think, we have been party to that and more this year. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Questions?
No.
Councillor Hemmons.
Thank you, Worship. And thank you both for being here tonight. Congratulations on Travelers Lodge. I think that's a huge feather in your cap. One of the original ideas behind the SPO was to try to bring some coordination to the sector providing services for our homeless population. There seemed to be a core group of folks who were always committed to coordination and then outliers. And I'm curious, particularly with the reconstitution of the Health and Housing Task Force, any successes you found in drawing those outliers into the concept.
Yeah, it's a good question. Thank you for that. And we work collaboratively every day with our partners in the community. The task force's role will be to really provide us a clear vision of where we're trying to get to, and also how we how we resource that in an effective way, and start putting benchmarks in place to be able to achieve that. A small level or a small example of coordination of function is that GIS-based system that is created out of Abbotsford. That is the kind of work that can make a big difference to outreach workers who are struggling to, and sometimes, operating blind really in the community currently about where where others are providing support and services. So those are 2 small examples of that. Thank you.
Thank you. Another, if I may, the Outshop, the loss of that Reaching Home funding that you noted, another piece that we always imagine the SPO to do would be to kind of direct funding. So we do have Reaching Home dollars coming in, and rather than seeing kind of pockets of money go to different little things, we're saying with the SPO we can perhaps have a deep investment in one solid piece that we collectively work on for a year or so, or however long. Is that happening, and is that the reason that the funds are shifting at the Reaching Home table?
It is, and there was widespread support for the idea of creating a drop-in center. It allows us to provide services, draw people into the in a way that we can't otherwise always do. We're often chasing around trying to find people to support them. So this is a very effective way to do it, and there was, as I said, broad support from the Community Advisory Board for that.
Great, thank you.
Thank you very much. Gentlemen, much appreciate the presentation tonight and the good work. And with respect to Travelers Lodge, as Councillor Hemmons said, well done. We have some committee minutes, meeting of the Design Advisory Panel just for receipt, Ms. Gurry. We have no consent items. We have delegations unrelated to agenda items, and the first is Alan Clark re-amendment to the Respectful Spaces Bylaw 2024, number 7381. Mr. Clark, if you would come down, you'll have 5 minutes, sir. When you have 1 minute left, I'll let you know. If you could introduce yourself for the record, please.
Oh, thank you. And you caught me unawares. I thought that my Dan was going to go first, so now I've lost my space, unfortunately. And I'm not too hot on my... Well, can I ask you to just excuse me so I can get off?
We'll let Mr. Hula go first then, Mr. Clark. Have a seat and find your spot.
Thank you.
Mr. Hula, you know the agenda and the rules. 5 minutes, introduce yourself for the record. When you have a minute left, I'll let you know, please, and thank you.
Good evening. My name is Dan Hula, and this presentation explores the viability of public-private partnerships. The discourse of PPPs in Canada, especially in British Columbia, reflects a broader debate on how infrastructure should be funded and managed. While PPPs have been praised for bringing private sector efficiency and innovation to public projects, the following criticisms highlight significant concerns about the cost control and whether these partnerships truly serve the public interest in the long term. Cost and value for money. Critics argue that PPPs often end up being more expensive than traditional public procurement methods. This is due to higher financing costs as private sector borrowing trends to be more expensive than government borrowing. Additionally, the value for money assessments used to justify PPPs have been questioned for their methodology and transparency, particularly relevant now with the current AAP. Number 2, risk transfer. When projects fail or face significant issues, the public sector often ends up bearing the financial burden. Number 3, inflexibility in long-term commitments. PPP contracts often lock governments into long-term agreements that can limit future flexibility. Number 4, public oversight and accountability. There's a concern over reduced public oversight and accountability in PPPs. The private sector's involvement can sometimes lead to less transparency in how public projects are managed and how funds are spent, which contrasts with traditional public procurement where there's typically more security. Again, our current AAP could have more oversight on things like the data center and surveillance and an admin building, which was originally just going to be public works. Number 5, economic efficiency and public interest. The focus on private profit can lead to project designs that prioritize cost recovery over public utility or community benefits, sometimes resulting in long-term user fees. Number 6, political and public perception. Negative impressions can occur when failure to deliver on time or on budget, or when the costs have significantly overrun initial projections, maybe like the Fire Hall or Metro Drive. Number 7, local needs versus standardized solutions. PPPs often provide standardized solutions. May be the case even, I'm not sure, you can clarify this, whether are we currently in a state of emergency, and was there any evidence provided at the local level to impose it in the first place at the end? Number 8, environmental and social considerations. This one in Nanaimo is just the opposite, where our cost overruns are actually based on erroneous information, based on human-caused climate change. The problem goes back to governments at all levels incorporating, with municipal levels adopting this in the early 1900s. This has led to a shift in accountability and loyalty from local citizens and the public to the corporations and their various associations. The 1942 Clearfield Doctrine court case provides the actual legal ruling on this. Now, this can be seen in the wording of This can be seen in the wording of oaths and declarations of office. From the research of Sheila McFarlane, a government for the people would have a mayor who takes a public oath of office, whereas a corporation would have a head of council or global mayor take a declaration of office. And it can't be both because one always has to take precedence. So, The best solution is to unincorporate and have our local government make decisions for Nanaimo by Nanaimo locals with valued input from the general public, not from overpaid consultants who jack up the price of mega projects or from organizations like the Union of BC Municipalities
1 minute, sir.
or Canadian Federation of Municipalities to get what basically is cookie cutter ideas, but it doesn't apply across the board to various and unique situations. Surely we can find local solutions for local problems. Citizens have much more respect for transparency and admission of mistakes and doing something to correct mistakes than for leaders who take an increasingly hardcore line of resistance to the very citizens they were elected to represent. It's not too late to do the right thing. Your legacy can be one of true leadership for the people rather than the last cog in a set of corporate wheels. Here's some sentiments from Sheila McFarlane when she ran for mayor against Cam Guthrie, head of council for the city of Gulf, Ontario at the time. I'll click through these kind of quickly. The point is there are things that can be done. And I do believe it is an essential to have a vibrant business community. Now, I can extend the opportunity for you to demonstrate your engaged commitment to public engagement.
You could wrap up, please.
That was it.
Thank you. I don't have any questions for you, but I do for Mr. Lindsay. Mr. Lindsay, is the city engaged in any private-public partnerships that we're aware of?
No, Your Worship.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. Hula. The next is Alan Clark. Mr. Clark, you're ready to go now, are you, sir?
Thank you. Thank you, I do appreciate that. Good evening, my name is Alan Clark and I live in Chase River. This evening I want to talk about the Respectful Spaces Bylaw number 7381. When this bylaw would seem to make good sense, it is far-reaching and leaves many concerns. Just one being a simple example, giving arbitrary power to all staff. Reporting to the incident, 7.5 of the bylaw. All municipal staff will exercise their power and authority under this bylaw within, bearing in mind, Human Rights Code, Charter of Rights. But this begs the question, what training does all municipal staff get so they're knowledgeable in this bylaw and how to carry it out? That is a concern. Heavy-handed penalties. Offense and penalty 10.2 of the bylaw. On being found guilty of an offense, the person is liable to pay A, if a proceeding is brought under the Offense Act, a fine of not less than $5,000 up to $50,000. If issued a bylaw notice under the bylaw number 7159, the person is liable to pay the maximum penalty set out in that bylaw and administration fees. Putting all that aside, staff and council should be able to work in relative safety and without fear. Considering this, does council think that the citizens of Nanaimo, those same citizens that funds the paychecks of every member of council and all city staff, should not have the same expectations that this bylaw gives to every city employer and council? Should the citizens of Nanaimo not be entitled to feel safe in their communities, to be able to enjoy the parks, walk down the streets without fear, to operate a business without fear that they will be vandalized, robbed, and I lost the word. On many occasions, this council treats the citizens of Nanaimo like they don't matter and sometimes even exist. As an example, council cooperating with BC Housing. Councillor Thorpe actually described them as not to be trusted. And then last week, they removed a good neighbor agreement in the last moment from a lease deal that they made with the city. And they stick facilities into neighborhoods without any public consultation, further bringing drug dealers, unrelated drug addicts, or untreated, theft, violence, destruction, and fear. You know, another example is the AAP, now in progress. I think this is a good example of how citizens are treated by this council. From the process itself, from the use of an AAP, instead of planning a referendum coinciding with a municipal election at no cost, or the borrowing of $90 million without explaining the real cost and what the project actually entails, to the ability to be able to obtain electoral response forms, to returning the signed forms, to the actual counting of the forms by one person in city staff without scrutiny. In this case, I believe it's Sheila Gurry. I also believe that Ms. Gurry's life partner is Mr. Lane, the president of CUPE, Local 401, the union representing the unionized workers of the city.
Point of order, Your Worship.
Councillor Brown, please.
I don't think this is
Could you stop my
relevant
clock,
nor
please?
particularly appropriate.
Could you stop my clock, please?
I just did, thank you.
Thank you very much.
Sorry, point of order, I couldn't catch that, Mr. Clark, please.
Thank you, Your Worship. I don't think it's particularly relevant to the presentation as suggested, nor do I think it's, and more importantly, appropriate. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I agree entirely. Mr. Clark,
almost
Mr. Clark, Mr. Clark,
Yes,
I haven't started the clock. Please just listen.
I'm listening.
Attacking city staff is not appropriate. I caution you against it. I'm not going to caution again.
Mr.
Clark,
Macro,
Mr.
you
Clark,
said at the beginning of this,
Mr. Clark.
democracy, we should not be subject to fear, interruption, ridicule.
Mr. Clark,
and the fact that
you
I
are
can't
not
make a
going to
comment-
use that microphone as a way to attack
I'm not
city staff.
I'm
Mr.
bringing
Clark,
up
Mr. Clark,
I got one statement to make.
you,
One final
yes, no,
statement.
you have one statement to make. Good
And
night,
it
sir.
doesn't
Your
mention
mic is
anybody's
off. I'm
name.
going to ask you to remove yourself from the podium.
Yeah, but hold on, it doesn't mention anybody's name. I'm sorry, I'm still.
Mr. Clark, I'm not going to say it again. You're done, sir. You're done, sir. You're done, sir. Would you move away from the podium, please, so that council can get on with its business? Mr. Clark?
Okay, well
Then, Mr. Clark, I suggest you stop putting yourself in situations where you behave obnoxiously in front of this council and trying to attack city staff. Sir, move yourself away from the podium. Move yourself away from the podium. We are going to recess for 10 minutes.
Oh my God.
And still again. You send ripples through still waters of ponds, making them glisten like 1,000 prisms.
Let's go. Let's go.
All right.
the list, but a full reapplication will happen in another 5 years. And as well, the current grants policy and guidelines were reviewed this year, and some housekeeping changes were made, as well as the addition of the temporary, supportive, and social housing sections were included into that policy. So quite a bit of work has been done on the PTEs this year, and we are here for first 3 readings.
Thank you very much. Councillor Armstrong. Sorry, she's on the list. Pardon me. Any questions for staff on this one? Pretty straightforward, I'm thinking. Councillor Eastmere?
I move that permissive tax exemption bylaw 2024 number 7388, a bylaw to exempt certain land and buildings from taxation, pass first reading.
Seconded, Councillor Thorpe. All those in favor? Any opposed? None. Motion carries. Councillor Eastmere?
Move that permissive tax exemption bylaw 2024 number 7388 pass second reading.
Seconded, Councillor Hemmons. Any discussion? Not seeing any. All those in favor? Any opposed? Motion carries.
And I move that permissive tax exemption bylaw 2024 number 7388 pass third reading.
Seconded, Councillor Thorpe. All those in favor? Any opposed? Motion carries. Thank you very much. The next is the Sustainable Building Policy. Mr. Sims, and you're going to introduce Ms. McCaskill, I'm going to guess.
Thank you, Your Worship. We have a brief presentation to update Council on the previously known as the Green Building Policy, which required LEED Silver or LEED Gold when building corporate facilities. As part of the overall policy rewrite, we've looked at this, and Ms. McCaskill will give you a brief overview of the Sustainable Building Policy. Thank you.
I wonder if you can just wait a second to make sure we get Councillor Manley back in. There we are. Thank you. Please proceed.
Thank you very much, Your Worship. Council, good evening. The existing Green Building Policy was adopted in 2006, last updated in 2011. The current policy requires LEED certification to either gold or silver level for new buildings or renovations of a certain size. Both the existing policy and proposed new policy only apply to buildings built and operated by the City of Nanaimo, which I will refer to through this presentation as corporate facilities. This presentation is intended to provide some background on the changes and how the new policy would be applied if adopted. Everyone is familiar with the Nanaimo Donut. There are 8 different green initiatives, but there are 35 different sustainable initiatives that are considered for holistic application within the community. The first notable change in the policy is the title. Changing from a green building strategy to a sustainable building policy is suggested to better articulate the impact of the policy on corporate facilities. This is mostly a title change, as LEED has evolved since referenced in the original policy into a more holistic approach to sustainable building rather than just focusing on traditional green initiatives. A balance needs to be struck between impact and opportunities. This curve shows one interpretation of the relationship between different initiatives. With the shift to sustainable building policy, the intent is to do no further harm while providing opportunity to use corporate facilities to give back to and have a positive impact on social and environmental well-being. Sustainable building should reflect the minimum social and environmental impact of corporate facilities, while regenerative buildings, on the far right, would produce a positive social and environmental impact. Regenerative infrastructure would allow restoration of ecosystems and produce positive social impact. This, however, does come with a financial cost with those sorts of facilities. The Nanaimo Donut is a good example of the balance being sought, with the ecological ceiling of the outer circle and the social foundations of the inner circle. Living within the means and capacity of this structure acknowledges that there is a balance to be struck. On the left photo is the water treatment plant, and the right photo is Oliver Woods Community Center. The water treatment plant was built with a LEED exemption. It's a very utilitarian building, whereas the Oliver Woods Community Center was part of the LEED certification program. The water treatment plant benefits from a minimalistic design principles and utilitarian finishes, while Oliver Woods Community Center blends into the community surroundings with form and character considerations and feels welcoming to building users while prioritizing community needs. Both building archetypes will benefit from fit-for-purpose design, ease of operations, and durable construction methods. However, Community Center will require more resources to transform durable construction into a welcoming atmosphere. Once a new corporate facility, substantial renovation, or addition to a corporate facility is moving forward, staff typically work with a suite of professionals. This typically would include architect or engineers. The needs and wants for the new community facility are identified, and the consulting team applies those design outcomes to their process, layering on codified requirements such as building code, development permit requirements, zoning bylaws, etc. There are also aesthetic considerations and visual impact to the community. If adopted under the new policy, the design team would review the city plan goals for alignment with the project and implement as many principles as reasonable within the project, recognizing that some of the goals of city plan are in opposition to one another and trade-offs would be required. The intent is for the consideration of the proposed sustainable building policy to be part of the iterative design process, taking minimal, if any, additional design efforts. If the process, previously there was an option for exemption from the policy, which has been removed. The threshold to meet the proposed policy is lower than this, as there is no specific targets to meet, but the proposed policy applies to more buildings as the smaller building area triggers the policy. This smaller corporate facility size triggering the policy is intended to require project teams to seek reasonable, sustainable building practices in most of the city's facilities. The lack of required targets was intentional to focus on fit-for-purpose construction and climate action at reasonable cost. The adoption of BC Energy Step Code and acceleration of the adoption of Zero Carbon Step Code provides minimum backstopping for many projects, but these do not apply to all corporate facility archetypes the city may consider. If the policy applies to the project based on the size, minimum policy requirements would apply. The intent of these requirements is for the project team to review the long-term impact of the decision made during design through a life cycle lens and consider trade-offs. Climate risk assessments are becoming an increasingly standardized part of project development and can be very straightforward for small projects or more involved for larger projects as appropriate. One outcome of this type of assessment would be appropriate sizing of a mechanical system to account for the expected temperature range in line with expected service life of the component. For example, if your component is an HVAC system and it's going to be in service for 20 years, you want to consider the temperature range that we're likely to experience in those 20 years so you have appropriate heating and cooling depending on changing in climate cycles. With respect to life cycle cost analysis for major systems, retrofitting after construction is more expensive than right sizing and proper equipment selection at the time of construction. Considering life cycle costing of major systems and equipment may result in reduced life cycle costs, which provide direct benefit to building users and facility staff. This typically becomes a bit of a trade-off during a value engineering exercise if there is budget considerations because it will potentially shift capital cost forward and you then take on potentially increased operating costs. But if you look at it through a life cycle lens, you can see where those costs are just shifted down the road. A project summary report, including design concepts listed on the slide, provide a summary of the 35 topic areas from City Plan as they relate to the construction of corporate facilities. The summary report would be a project deliverable and provide an accounting of the discussion and ultimate implementation of the applicable portions of City Plan. Building commissioning is an important part of the construction project and provides verification that the baseline expectations are being met at the time of handover and sets the project up for successful operations. This is typically happening on projects currently, as it is good practice, but item 4 adds follow-up commissioning to ensure the building operation is continued to be optimized. Reviewing past council decisions, costs for certifications were cited as the usual reason for requesting an exemption from the green building strategy. These are direct cost savings to the project for following the principles but not seeking the certification. While there is still reporting deliverables included in the proposed policy, they are not as onerous as the formal certification, nor would they require an additional consultant, which is typically one of the pieces of a LEED project. Requiring certification is a way to enforce the application of principles, and there is a risk that without the certification process, minimal improvements over code minimums will be realized. This will be dependent on the project team. By setting the minimum requirements to include a project report, the intent of the decisions and recording of the trade-offs made during the project design phase becomes part of the project record and will be collected annually and reported to council. The intent would be that this report to council would be part of annual reporting and wouldn't generate an additional report to council. And I have completely, oh no, I did okay. In summary, the intent of the policy is to have each member of the project team consider the strategic direction of city plan, the impact of the many project decisions made during development as they relate to city plan and sustainable construction, and to provide a record of reasoning, impact, and ultimately the decisions being made during the process.
Ms.
I'm
Bragasco,
happy to
thank you
take any
very much.
questions. And I'm sorry that the report is quite technical in nature, so I'm hopefully prepared, but I do recognize it was a little chewy.
It's quite all right. We've still got our teeth, no dentures here.
Good.
Councillor Armstrong, Gesselbrock, and Thorpe.
2 questions for you, thank you. So what I'm hearing from you, basically, it's like something I've been asking for a long time, is that you would actually be doing a cost-benefit analysis report. So then it would be up to this council or whatever council of the day to say, yes, we agree with this sustainable policy or we don't. Because I've done some research on some of this and spoken to different planners and developers, and some say going to these sustainable practices can cost anywhere between 20 to 30% more on a project, which if you take a look at a project like the Public Works could be $20 million. So that would be a decision that would come back to this table to see, okay, are we prepared to spend an extra $20 million? And if so, will there be justification so that we can show to the public, this is why we did it, because of A, B, C, and D?
Through your worship to Councillor Armstrong, costing associated with sustainable building practices is definitely something that's speculated on a regular basis, but it's really hard to actually quantify unless you've done the costing exercise and completed the design in both directions. So the intent with the revised policy would be to have that life cycle consideration, and it would see that benefit pulled across the overall life cycle of the facility. So I understand the increased capital cost, but that capital cost reasonably ought to offset operational costs associated with facilities. And I've heard similar numbers, 20 to 30%. We did not see those kind of numbers when we removed the certification piece from LEED. That was part of the council record. And there's a lot of speculation, but no real finite number on what the cost might be, because it is so dependent on what you're talking about. If you're saying the building is going to have 6 inches of exterior insulation or it's going to have 8 inches, that's going to be a relatively low cost measure because you're already putting insulation on, you're just putting a little bit extra in thickness, versus something that might be you weren't doing a geothermal heat exchange, but now you're adding a whole new system to the building. So it really depends on the project, and I would be really hesitant to associate a specific percentage.
So just the big thing for me is that we would be getting this information so we could make an informed decision, correct? Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Gesselbrock, then Councillor Thorpe.
Thanks for the report and policy. I guess a few comments with questions here. One, I guess going to this policy, like I've been here in the past and asked to waive like the LEED standard because of certain costs, and that's fine. But this is all sort of like, I guess, not aspirational. There's things that we have to do to go through, but there's no requirements. And, you know, there was one building, for example, here where we did waive the LEED, but we were assured like it's going to be sustainable right in the middle of greenhouse gas, and a giant, you know, natural gas cooking stove was put in. And a little frustrating, but because there was just no standard and like set, it's up to the design team to make those decisions, and it becomes so complex that it's difficult for a council to wade through. And so I guess like there's not really a lot of teeth in the policy other than there's just not as much standardization. And I guess for me, like there's two things that I really care about. Like in the sense of a standard being met is that, you know, we have to reduce our greenhouse gas emissions, and that we're striking to have, you know, we've passed the zero carbon step code for new builds. Are we trying to achieve that standard in every building that we're putting in? You know, there's going to be some cases for particular applications where of course we might need natural gas or something in there, but that's the standard, is that we're going to try to have it be net zero and utilize electric systems. I would like to see a standard like that. And I guess the other two is just the building materials used. You know, at the end of this building's life cycle, is it built in a way that it's just going to be a giant thing of garbage that we're going to gather up and bring it over to the landfill? Or is it constructed in a way that it is possible to be deconstructed, and the materials, there is some thought into it of like what's the end of life of this? And I think all those things are spoken to in the policy, but I guess I'm just not sure like how tightly adhered to are they, and what would be the expectation from the expectation of council in terms of adherence to those type of things.
Through your worship to Councillor Gesserbrock, very good points. You're right, there is no set minimums, but the guidance document speaks to what leadership would look like in those areas. One thing that was tried to balance was the cost implication of some of these larger initiatives. Zero carbon step code is definitely one. Consideration of embodied carbon and life cycle carbon analysis is another one. Recognizing that if there's a line in the sand drawn on a specific item, we may, as an organization, be backed into a corner on overall development. And so the intent is throughout the evolution of a project, staff come to council on a regular basis. Consider how many times you've seen people discussing the public works yard update. There are a number of check-ins that the project team would be providing to council, that there would be an organic opportunity for council to provide direction as to the leadership level shown in any of these scenarios. And then there would be a specific project identified that the project team could then go back and regroup on the specific ask. For example, if it was, we want this new building to be zero carbon, then the project team could come back to council and say, based on your requirement, the cost associated with that is this particular number. Trying to bake that into a policy that is really wide-reaching is extremely difficult. And as I said, the intent was to make sure that we're not pigeonholing our facilities into certain types, certain sustainable initiatives, so that we can continue to broadly address sustainability within the portfolio. Anything that we're doing in one facility, using carbon as an example, the first ton of carbon is the easiest, the last ton of carbon is the most expensive. So to chase zero carbon in a single building, we actually can do a lot more for our carbon footprint if we take that investment and take top 5 tons off of every facility. So there's an opportunity when it's a new build, and it's a really important question to ask, but it really needs to come down to, or the intent here is that it comes down to the project team coming to council for a very specific project, and then getting that instruction based on where council is comfortable with the budget and the intended use of the facility.
Okay, thank you. I definitely understand the approach, and I guess on some of these metrics that we know, or some of these veins that we know are really important, there's a part of me that feels more comfortable if just a standard is set, and then like the example when we like say we're not going to do the LED when we get to that point of the design, to be like, you know what, it doesn't make sense in the specific circumstance to do it this way, and we should look at that to repeal it, rather than sort of go in the other direction where you like, oh, where are we going to take leadership? Because I think it almost sets the standard and bar low, and then you're working from there. And yeah, it's one I need to think through a little bit more, but I am a little bit uncomfortable with sort of this approach. Thank you.
Thank you. And Councillor Thorpe, please.
Thanks very much, Your Worship. Through you to Ms. McCaskill, thank you so much. I struggled my way through the policy, but I appreciated your covering report. And I think I basically understand the concept at least, and I think I basically support it because it's replacing a one-size-fits-all policy with something which is more individualized to look at variables for each individual project, if I'm correct. I guess my only concern or hesitation is when you mention the impact on the cost, and that's hard to determine depending on the project. Has there been any consultation or feedback from local builders or the building association? Have they had a chance to see this or consider it?
Thank you for the question, through your worship. There was no consultation. This is intended to be corporately owned and operated facilities. So the organization is the one who is making the cost considerations, and it would be direction given through the design team to the contractor who's building. So it's the same as whether when you're building a house, do you choose a laminate countertop or a granite countertop? You're the one in your own home to determine if there's value there. So in this instance, the city is the one owning and operating, and through the project team and consultation with council and the direction received, then those value items would be pursued for the project.
All right, that makes sense. Thanks very much.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you very much. I'm not seeing any further questions. Someone care to make the motion? Moved Councillor Perino, seconded Councillor Armstrong. Any discussion? Councillor Brown.
Thanks, Your Worship. I don't think I'll be supporting this. I appreciate the work that's gone into it, but I actually kind of think it hits an uncomfortable middle spot for me in that it isn't prescriptive with goals, but also I think adds process. And I hear the comment it wasn't intended to, but I look at that as more process, more expense, more council check-ins, where, you know, I think a more simplified approach, and there would potentially be some gaps that just would need to be worked through, would be the same standard in which we hold everybody to, and is inspired by the city plan goals and uses the legislative tools, you know, the development permit areas, the building code. And I think that would be a far easier and quicker process with the necessary modifications made in the policy for some of our buildings. And I would just say, yeah, there's a lot of principles in there and guidelines, and I appreciate that. But when I'm being perfectly honest, my expectation was any one of our planners or project managers on these projects would know of those and have the ability to come forward to council and say, this is approach we're wanting to take. So I appreciate that a lot of work has gone into it. For me, it just sort of misses the mark, and I won't be supporting it. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Perino.
Thank you, Worship. Well, now, okay, now I have to ask a question, just listening to Councillor Brown. Through you, if I may, the way I read this was that it would not in fact be more burdensome, but in fact less burdensome, because some buildings require, some buildings are more able to, I'm trying to think of the wording. Some would be easier to do more, some would be easier to do less. And that this policy allows that, for the lack of a better word, negotiating to make the process simpler. That's the way I read it. Did I miss the mark?
Through your worship, Councillor Prina, no, you didn't miss the mark. The intent is to be simpler.
Yes.
Maybe a good example would be, and I'm sorry, I'm not overly familiar with the current LEED credit catalog, but things like proximity to local transit.
Yes.
That might be a really easy credit to get if you're building in the downtown core. If you're building a water treatment plant or a pump house, not really applicable. There's going to be city staff generally going to those locations and they don't need that proximity. But if you're building to a credit total, in usually any of the proprietary certifications, there's some level of threshold to meet a certain number of credits. Sometimes it can be difficult to achieve the necessary number of credits, which is likely the reason that a lot of those facilities come to council for exemption.
Yes.
But it doesn't mean that there couldn't be other things pursued. And the other kind of wrinkle in all of this is that, yes, there's a BC Energy Step Code, and yes, there's a zero carbon step code. And I am not a planner nor am I an architect, so again, I'll do my best. But the different occupancy groups that are identified in the building code have varying applicability of the BC Energy Step Code and the Zero Carbon Step Code.
Okay.
And the only building archetype that the city might build that does have the Zero Carbon Step Code as applicable would be an office building. If we build an arena or a swimming pool, Zero Carbon Step Code doesn't apply yet, as in the current iteration. Something like the RCMP detachment, it neither has an energy requirement nor a carbon requirement under the current structure. So the intent is to acknowledge that the one-size-fits-all doesn't quite fit.
That's right.
But that doesn't mean there isn't an opportunity to be a leader in that portion of the building and improve on what a building of that archetype or a different archetype might be required to do. So maybe we build a police station and it has no energy specific requirements, but through the project team, it's determined that no, it needs to have a total energy use of X and a thermal energy demand of Y, and this will be a sustainable way to maintain the operation of the building, because all of those costs kind of trail into the operating.
Okay, so the reason why I'm going to be voting in favor of this is it appeared to be much less one size fits all, much more negotiating to what is needed and why that's needed, and to work that through. So it sounds to me like it might be less cumbersome, might be less expensive, might be more time, I shouldn't say efficient, but let's say less time required. I don't see the problem that that has been mentioned, and I don't want it to fail, because I think this is something that we've needed. I was very pleased to see it, so thank you.
Thank you. Before I call for the vote, and maybe to give council some comfort, Mr. Sims, what was the example you used today of I believe it was carpet or something that would get you an extra point for a LEED standard?
Yeah, thanks, Your Worship. I think Ms. McCaskill talked a little bit about the proximity to transit as an example. So LEED is a series of points that you chase, essentially, and the intent is very good. But familiar with another municipality that put a low VOC carpet in a boardroom so they could get a point for installing low VOC carpet in a boardroom that they would have normally just left as polished concrete. So that's kind of the example that we're trying to avoid. It's as Ms. McCaskill mentioned, it's fit for purpose. I think city plan provides all staff, and this isn't intended to be a cross the organization, sets the standard for improving our sustainability, but in consideration with prosperity, in consideration with accessibility and inclusion, and if we try to build a pool with zero carbon heating, we'll not be able to afford it, and as just a random example. And I think that's the intent of this. The project team, it helps focus the project team on the goals within city plan, recognizing that sort of the overarching is around green and sustainable initiatives, but may not be able to be achieved in all elements of each project.
Thank you. Councillor Gesselbrock and then Councillor Brown again.
Thanks. I appreciate the practicability of the policy. I do agree sort of with the way that the LEED standard certification process are set up. They just add unnecessary costs and monitoring that don't need to be there, and get into these silly situations with VOC carpet or whatever. And I don't think that it's worth wasting our time with that, and I appreciate sort of the switch. I think that this policy is getting us part way to where I think I do think it could use a little bit more work in sort of some of the key areas, a bit more prescriptiveness to sort of set a bar that we would work back from if it doesn't make sense for a particular building, as opposed to take leadership on. So at this moment, I don't think I can support it, but I appreciate the direction that it's going in, and you can always modify it later on. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Brown.
Thanks, Your Worship. Just to be clear, I'm not advocating for the existing LEED policy. And I also think if you probably look at the numbers, like, we haven't really built that many things and it comes for exemption. So I think that's kind of an unfair comparison. I think just the appropriate way is to analyze this on its own. And, I would love to be wrong if this is adopted, that this process as outlined will not result in more expensive buildings with marginable benefit. Thank you.
Thank you. The motion's on the floor. All those in favor?
Your Worship.
Sorry, Councillor Manley. Pardon me.
Thank you, Your Worship. Yeah, I'm not necessarily in favor of following LEED standards when that's not exactly applicable to the buildings that we're creating or that we need to create. And so I'm in favor of a policy that sets out our goals and our own standards. And I'm not sure exactly what Councillor Gesselbrock would see as improvements to this document, because I'm not a building specialist, but I think it's a good start, and I do see the advantage of not trying to meet a standard based on it, and paying extra costs based on trying to meet a point system when it doesn't necessarily make sense. So yeah, I'm a bit on the fence on this one, on the vote, but I do appreciate the staff report and the guidance document. Thank you.
Thank you very much. All those in favor, Councillors Armstrong, Eastmere, Hemmons, Mayor Krogh, Thorpe, Perino, and Manley, and those opposed, Councillors Gesselbrock and Brown. Motion carries. Thank you very much. Mr. Pascal, Mr. Sims, thank you for this. The next is development permit application number DP 1347-6330 McRobb Avenue. Mr. Holm, good evening. Welcome.
Thank you. Good evening, Your Worship and Council. I'll try and be brief on this. This is effectively a renewal, I guess, of a development permit previously issued in 2022 by Council. This is for an 86-unit, 6-story building in the Dover neighborhood within the Woodgrove Secondary Urban Center, and designed by Dariush Feruzli Architecture. Renderings are on attachment F. There's a height variance requested. It's consistent with the previously approved development permit. I'm happy to take any questions. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I'm not, Councillor Easter is moving the recommendation. Councillor Perino is
I'll
seconding.
second it.
Is there a question?
I just had a very,
Councillor Perino.
sorry, Your Worship, just a very quick question. Rental? I saw the word rental in
I
the
believe
report,
so.
that's right.
I believe so.
Okay.
Yeah, we
It's just so important right now.
can't guarantee that, but I think that's the intention.
That's the goal. Okay, good, thank you.
Thank you very much. All those in favor? Any opposed? None. Motion carries. Thank you. The next is small-scale multi-unit housing zoning amendment 2498 Rosstown Road. Mr. Holm again, please.
Thank you. This is the first of a handful of rezonings that staff anticipate coming forward as a result of applications that are in-stream, applications for subdivision that are in-stream, that were exempt previously from the provincial housing, small-scale multi-unit housing zoning requirements. This is a 13-lot subdivision. The property was previously larger than the 4,050 square meter exemption that was provided for by the province for rezoning to the small-scale multi-unit housing zone, the R5 zone. The property has subsequently completed the subdivision application. It was in stream at the time the legislation came in and the zoning was approved. It's no longer exempt and is required to be rezoned. This is a bit interesting in that this bylaw, as proposed, as put forward tonight, it's prohibited from proceeding to public hearing. No other approvals are required, so we're looking at introduction, second, third, and adoption all in the same evening. This is a property that's neighborhood designated, and the development under the R5 would be consistent with what we'd anticipate seeing develop in the neighborhood. I'm happy to take any questions. Thanks.
Thank you very much. I am not seeing any questions. Councillor Eastmere, please.
I move that zoning amendment bylaw 2024 number 4500.231 amendment to implement the provincial small-scale multi-unit housing legislation receive first reading.
Seconded, Councillor Perino. All those in favor? Any opposed? None. Motion carries.
Move that zoning amendment bylaw 2024 number 4500.231 receive second reading.
Seconded, Councillor Perino. Any discussion? Not seeing any. All those in favor? Any opposed? None. Motion carries.
Move that zoning amendment bylaw 2024 number 4500.231 receive third reading.
Seconded, Councillor Thorpe. All those in favor? Any opposed? None. Motion carries.
And motion that zoning amendment bylaw 2024 number 4500.231 be adopted.
Seconded, Councillor Thorpe. All those in favor? Any opposed? None. Motion carries. We're on to bylaws. The first is Fire Protection and Life Safety Regulation Amendment Bylaw 2024, number 7108.04. Councillor Eastmere.
I move that Fire Protection and Life Safety Regulation Amendment Bylaw 2024 number 7108.04, a bylaw to amend the provision associated with fuel tank installation, removal, or withdrawing a fuel tank from service, be adopted.
Seconded, Councillor Crimmins. All those in favor? Any opposed? None. Motion carries. The next is Bylaw Notice Enforcement Amendment Bylaw 2024, number 7159.22. Councillor Eastmere.
I move that bylaw notice enforcement amendment bylaw 2024 number 7159.22 fines for micro-mobility devices be adopted.
Seconded, Councillor Thorpe. All those in favor? Any opposed? None. Motion carries. Thank you. And the next is Housing Agreement Bylaw 2024, number 7387. Councillor Eastmere, please.
I move that housing agreement bylaw 2024 number 7387 to secure rental tenure and non-market rental housing be adopted.
Seconded, Councillor Perino. All those in favor? Any opposed? None. Motion carries. We have no correspondence. We have no notices of motion. Other business, it's at my request that in accordance with Section 131 of the Community Charter, I've requested that Council reconsider the request from Forestry Works for BC for a letter of support. The request was previously declined by Council at our September 9th regular meeting. Council expressed the desire to review a copy of the potential letter of support. I would therefore move a motion that we do provide a letter of support to Forestry Works for BC to the Honourable David Eby, Premier, British Columbia. There are sample letters in the package, and my suggestion is that the one from the town of Campbell River, which makes no particular reference to the annual allowable cut, would form the basis of any letter. My intention would be to refer to this motion if it passes, and then a shortened version of that letter dated May the 28th, 2024. Is there a seconder? Seconded, Councillor Thorpe. Discussion on this, Councillor Armstrong, then Councillor Gesselbrock.
Yeah, I think it's very important to do this. I went to all the resource things at UBCM. I went and talked to the Indigenous First Nations leaders for forestry, et cetera, and they're very, very supportive of this. They want to see a joint management plan come together with all the stakeholders, and I think that's what this does. It's not about asking to change dollars. It's asking for the province to work with all stakeholders to come up with an agreeable plan. And we heard the cost to the north, especially of all the mills, et cetera, closing. With the new movement to do 12-story wood buildings, we're not getting our wood even locally. It's coming from places like Brazil, et cetera, with terrible records. So I think it's something that we need to look at to try and also support our local businesses, which employ a lot of people and bring lots of tax dollars here. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Councillor Gesselbrock.
Thanks. Yeah, I reviewed the letters from Campbell River and then I think Terrace. And I don't think I can support writing a letter of support for the Forestry Works for BC campaign. It's a specific campaign, and in the letters it's interesting because there's no actual direct ask, but it's veiled that basically the changes that were brought in around policy shift to more ecosystem-based management, conservation, and in the permitting process, incorporating First Nations values and interests to look at changing that. And I think there was a lot of work that went into getting this on the table in terms of the provincial government to go ahead with it. This includes like the old growth deferrals, and the whole process of the permitting process has shifted. It's given, I think there are some issues in it that things could be made more efficient, but I don't really feel that this is what the Forestry Works for BC request is asking for. And I think that we would be lending our voice to a particular campaign that doesn't quite reflect the values of our community and what we've been, advocating for. So I think that, if we do, if there's interest in writing a letter to the province, not as part of the Forestry Works for BC, we can entertain that with specific wording, but I think it's important that we, support the policies that have been put in place, and there will be some impact in terms of the implementation of them as everybody gets on board and understanding it, and definitely some kinks in it need to be worked out. But I disagree with the premise of the campaign and where it's coming from. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Councillor Thorpe.
Thank you, Your Worship.
It's all right. There we go.
Thank you very much, Your Worship. Through you. Yeah, I'm going to support this. I did second the motion, and I'm glad to see it's back at this table. My take on this is something that Councillor Armstrong alluded to. To me, this is supporting local business and our local economy. We had representatives from Harmac and Coastland Wood here. These are major employers in our city, and they are major taxpayers. And I think we have a duty to listen to when they make a reasonable request for a general letter of support for their industry. And I'll just add that earlier this month, I saw and read that Forest Minister Ralston referenced the forest industry as a quote, foundational part, end quote, of the province, and mentioned that his government would work to support both local jobs and wood manufacturing operations. I think this letter would simply remind him of that commitment. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Councillor Perino.
Thank you, Your Worship. I just wanted to say thank you so much for having the letters in this so that we could see what different types of communities had sent. The only reason I voted against it the last time was because we didn't have any letter of support for us to view, so this was really helpful, and I will be getting my full support.
Thank you very much. Motion's on the table. All those in favor? Oh, pardon me, Councillor Manley, sorry, keep forgetting you. You're too quiet tonight, not noticing you.
Thank you, Your Worship.
Nothing like illness, is there?
Yeah, just getting over COVID from the UBCM. There was an event held in town here with that the council and was invited to, the Power of Forests, and there was a professional forester who's recently retired and can now speak up about what he's been seeing in the industry. And he made it very clear that we've been over harvesting in the province, and we've seen examples in Grand Forks where the boundary watershed had been overlogged, and so the city of Grand Forks have been flooded multiple times because there's no forest left to hold back the water when we get these excessive rains. And I think that the provincial government is making some positive steps towards more conservation-based, ecosystem and science-based forestry, and also more involvement with First Nations. And we have different scenarios on the public forests, forest lands than we do in the private managed forest lands. And the private managed forest lands are impacting our local forest companies in different ways. So we see a lot of raw log exports happening here. There was a lot of recommendations that came out of the 2019 consultation on private managed forest lands that came from local governments. So all the regional districts and all the local First Nations had very good points to make, very good recommendations that are based on ecosystem and conservation science, and actually putting some of the decisions back in the hands of local governments and local First Nations. And I think that, you know, if we were going to be stepping into this during an election and writing a letter of support doesn't feel right to me, for one thing, but I think that what we should be doing is advocating that report and the recommendations that were made in that 2019 consultation are followed through on by the next government. And so I'm not prepared to support a letter at this time. I'm very supportive of our local forest industry, and they continue to decline, and they decline for, you know, for a number of reasons. And you know, I've been lobbied in the past by Nanaimo Forest Products to ask that Mosaic not be allowed to continue to increase exports of raw logs. And you know, they're not always in an easy position, because they have to rely on companies like Mosaic to ensure that they get some supply to keep that mill running. And so it is a complicated situation, and I'm not comfortable with stepping into it with this letter at this point, and so I'm not going to support it. Thank you.
Thank you very much. All those in favor, Councillors Armstrong, Mayor Krogh, Councillor Thorpe, Councillor Prino, and those opposed, Councillors Eastmere, Gesselbrock, Hemmens, Brown, and Manley. The motion is defeated. Thank you very much. Question period, Mr. Lindsay?
Your Worship, before we go to question period, I know it's unusual that I speak at this point in your agenda, but there was just something that happened here earlier tonight, and I just think I'd like to take a moment to address it.
Please.
I think there was comments made by a delegation that were intended to call into the question the reputation or ethics of one of our staff. I don't think I need to tell you that at the end of the day, as civil servants, at the end of our day or at the end of our careers, all we really have is our reputation, and it's incredibly important to us. I want this to be clear to anyone listening that I hold myself and staff to the highest ethical standard. If people have evidence to the contrary, I would strongly encourage them to bring that evidence forward. I think it's disappointing that someone can show up here without evidence and call into question staff's ethics and reputation. Your Worship, I do not need to sit here and vouch for your staff. They've done that themselves over many, many years, and in some cases decades of service to our community. However, I do want to apologize to staff who are inappropriately targeted from time to time, including here tonight. As staff, we completely understand that not everyone agrees with, how we deal with certain situations or how council weighs certain significant matters, and that people have different opinions. We accept that. What I cannot accept is that staff become collateral damage, and because it makes some sort of cheap point that they're allowed to have their reputation called into question, again, without evidence. And finally, Your Worship, I just really wanted to thank you and all of council for your support, not only tonight, but any time this issue comes up. So thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Lindsay. Your remarks are appreciated, and I want to assure Ms. Gurry and others who were impacted by what happened here tonight that I am getting increasingly intolerant of the kind of behaviors that have come to pass in this chamber from time to time. I don't recall seeing this during the first term of council. It is particularly offensive to me that someone who has been taken out of this chamber before by police would choose to come back and behave in the way that Mr. Clark did tonight. And I would hope he would consider his behaviors in the future. I would hate to be in a position where this council may have to decide not to allow delegations. There is no requirement at law to allow delegations. If we want to have a public forum where people get to behave and ask questions and perhaps behave in unreasonable ways, that can be a decision of council. But I would not like to think that delegations, coming as often as they do, some of them, and speaking in the manner in which they do, becomes the hallmark of public behavior. It is extremely disappointing to me. I am astonished that people would choose to behave in that manner. Quite candidly, I would characterize it as nothing more than infantile. The most basics of the way we treat each other should be established in kindergarten, and it's clear that some people have chosen not to behave appropriately. Having said that, question period. Is there any questions? Mr. Lindsay, you're close, please. Thank you. Ms. Gurry, the first is Mr. Rempel on the Nanaimo Prosperity Corp, and the second is Mr. Collin on the Mayor's report, and neither of them are subject for question period. Appreciate the attempts, gentlemen. If you want to have a private discussion at some other point about this, you're more than welcome to do so, but the council bylaw is fairly clear about what question period is designed to do. Motion for adjournment, please. Moved Councillor Perino, seconded Councillor Hemmons. All those in favor? Any opposed? None? Thank you very much. Thank you.